Hi, everybody. It's Dale Walsh, the poetic warrior from the Mental Health Warriors, and welcome to Straight, Sane, and Sober for the lunar eclipse day on November 8th, 2022. Apparently, it's the last full lunar eclipse we'll have till 2025, and actually, lunar eclipses have been very significant in my life, so I'm very happy to have as my guest today Cozette Bolden, who I know too, but she's like a work associate, and she's also the mother of a son who is basically recovered from bipolar, uh, from the bipolar illness, and she's going. She and I are going to talk about like the trials and triumphs of raising and dealing with an affected with a loved one who's affected by mental illness. So. We'll be right back, and let me just start our show. Sorry, I should have let you say hello, Cozette. I just like did the intro and they didn't even let you say anything. I apologize.
It's okay. Hi. Hello, Dale.
How are you today?
I'm doing great today. How are you?
Very well, thanks. As you might know, I always start with a poem because I'm the poetic warrior. So I picked. I was looking for a lunar. I think you're muted. Uh, I, okay. I was looking for a lunar eclipse poem, but I couldn't find one, so I came across this one. It's called "Truly Simple is Simply True," and actually, I think I've read this one before, but it's one of my favorites. It goes, "I love you like the diamond, the light it refracts. I adore you like the infant, the comfort of a first teddy bear. I cherish you like the morning glory, the sun that lets it bloom. I treasure you like the hidden fishes within the depths of the ocean. I want you like the air currents upon which the singing swallows soar. I need you like the oxygen that keeps alive every breathing creature. I desire you like the delicious taste of a peach in perfect season. I crave you like the fields of wheat the fertile soil where they grow. I trust you like the innocent child to wisdom of deeply devoted parents, and I respect you like the great judge, the integrity, correct rule of law, because every morning I wake from a night of scattered dreams to open my eyes once again to sweet sublime beauty of reality, in which the gift of your fine presence fills me with longing to hold you through the trials of doubt to which I am subject, living a life where the actuality of the Lord is in question." So,
Very beautiful. Who wrote that?
me.
You. Yes, that's amazing, Dale. I love it. You know, I think the line that stood out to me the most as we talk about this subject today of just me and my son was the one about trust, right? Because
Right,
that just blind and innocent trust that our kids have, right? For us to make decisions for them that are in their best interest, and they're not asking questions. They're not saying, "Hey, are you sure this is the right thing? Hey, are you sure?" They're just saying yes to everything that you're deciding. So it's so I think it's just so important as we talk about this topic today as it relates to the journey with my son, how much trust he had in me.
right.
Um, and that just really touched my heart right now.
Well, I
So
mean, in my coaching business, as the families of schizophrenia, I really encourage like the building of trust and building a foundation of trust, and also patience and faith. And we'll get into faith in a little while because I know that's been an important part of not only your journey but also Mari what also your son's journey. But why don't we just start with you giving some background about yourself first, because I'm sure people are interested.
well, well, I don't know about that, but I'll just tell you a little bit about me. I come from a large family of, I have 7 siblings. I was born in Oregon, grew up in Los Angeles. This is my home. This is what I consider my home. I am a forever Los Angelino. I am married. I have 3 of my own children. I still to this day, claim, motherhood and raising my children as my really is my I'll call it my greatest success and what has given me the most joy in my life. I just love people, and I particularly love kids. So it's a little bit about me.
Well, that shows in everything you do. You're such like a sweet person, and people are just like transfixed by your kindness and your compassion. But you one thing that I wanted to bring up about you is you have an incredible singing voice, and you say that your big goal is to win a Grammy, but didn't you weren't you in like a family singing group when you were growing up?
Yes, so I gave you the really, really, really abridged version about Cozette, but yes, I certainly had a many years of singing professionally. I started when I was a kid. I was 5 years old, first time I was on stage, and my mother and my aunt and my uncle, pretty much everyone in my mother's family were singers, but my mother, my aunt, my uncle were just incredible singers. My aunt is actually the sole background voice on the Stevie Wonder song "As." I don't know if you know that song
Oh,
"As"
okay,
by
I
Stevie
know.
Wonder. That's my aunt singing background, and my mother really kind of saw that her kids, were gifted with some of the same talents as she had, and so we had a group. And so yeah, I spent many years singing professionally. And then I decided I would just go ahead and be a mommy, and devote my attention there and do what I needed to do to take care of and raise my children. But ultimately, that passion, in your heart, it never goes away. So yeah, I absolutely
Right.
still have a desire to win my Grammy one day.
Well, I'm sure with your determination you'll do that, and I'm looking forward to watching you walk on that Grammy stage in excess.
Yes,
But, but so you say you have 3 kids, right?
I do.
And
Yes.
so why don't you give us a little bit about your son who came down with bipolar? I mean, were there early indications of like something wrong, or was it just
So
like
I think um, the answer in short is yes. But my son is absolutely amazing and incredible, super just empathetic and compassionate and kind and outgoing, and everybody is his friend. And I remember, we grew up in the, stranger danger times, right? Beware of strangers, right? And so he was so friendly and so outgoing all the time that I was always concerned that he'd walk up to someone, like say at school when I wasn't there yet, and then I'd look up and I'd be looking for my son. I mean, that's how friendly he was, right? And everyone was his friend, and he wanted to be kind and put a smile on everyone's faces. And he was just wonderful, just sweet young man. Never gave me um, any issues like behavioral issues or things like that growing up. But he was diagnosed early on with ADHD, and I see we had a ticker scrolling on the bottom of your screen. It says in the stigma. And certainly there's a certain amount of stigma or just being different when people have these labels placed on them, right? So my son was diagnosed ADHD and then taken out of traditional learning classes and put into special education classes, right? That kind of had its effect on him that it had on him, right? It made him feel different. And he was different, but he was different in that how kind he was, right? Most of his kids were at school were we're, not trying to just make someone laugh and smile, right? So he was different, certainly in that way. But being put in special ed classes, kids tend to make fun, and that just kind of started this self-esteem challenge, for him, and then feeling like he belonged, or did he not belong. He was absolutely loved in the home, and felt that love in our home. But so much we still crave for the acceptance, right, of other people. So that ADHD diagnosis and being put into special education classes, I think had a degree of had an impact on him that I kind of really wasn't anticipating. I didn't know, your first time parent.
A
Yeah.
ripple effect.
Well, yeah, actually, yeah. So, and it's something that you can't prepare for because it's your first time as a parent dealing with
Right.
this. So how do you know, right? What to anticipate? And actually, when he was 13, he was that was his first hospitalization into a mental health facility at age 13. And it was very, very confusing. It kind of came out of nowhere, where and that was for suicide ideations, right? At age 13, he just got afraid of what life had in store for him. And it didn't look all positive. And so he knew, or he felt in his heart, that he needed to be somewhere where he could be safe, right? And that was kind of the beginning of, was there any indication early on, to answer your question, right? So at age 13 was his first hospitalization.
Right. Well, I can definitely empathize with him about like being like the outgoing. I mean, I was such an outgoing kid, and people said I had basically infinite energy, and I was
Yes.
always. I mean, for instance, when my mother brought home my future father, she was still married to my second father, and my sister got very upset. She like, but to me, my mother couldn't do any wrong, so I didn't really see anything wrong. But I remember the first dinner we had. My favorite meal was fried chicken, and I ate like 6 drumsticks. I was always like the shortest kid in my school, but or at least in my grade, and so. But I was like quite a voracious eater, so
Yeah.
I ate 6 drumsticks to impress the judge, just to and people always said, they would say, you have more energy than anybody else I know, and I was always like trying to like make people happy, but that did have an effect because people would say I was weird, or like I meant like people, peers would like whisper behind my back, you're weird, and but the ADHD that you're talking about, that's that once you get the label, then I think a lot of there's a tendency to self stigmatize and just like identify with the illness rather than seeing yourself as a whole individual.
Well, I think, Dale, that we put so much, speaking of trust, going back to trust, we put so much trust in the extension of the home, right? The people who were there, the teachers, right? And the after school providers and people like that, who your kids spend so much time with when you're at work, right? So there's this group of people who we entrust to really take care of, love, and to some degree, at least not necessarily love, but at least care, make sure that they're being cared for and things like that. And there was one teacher when he was in the third grade, and in front of the entire class, he came home one day sad, just really, really sad and crying. And I'm like, what's the matter, right? What happened? And this teacher had also been the teacher for one of my daughters, and she was wonderful. She was absolutely wonderful. But for my son, he was a challenge for her. And in front of the entire class, she bends down, and his description was yelled in my ear, "What's wrong with your brain?" These are people that we believe are acting in the best interest of our children. And I don't know uh, at that point, what was going on in her life, I don't know, but that affected my son, and that gave me something to deal with. And there was another teacher. Not all of the teachers were this way, but there was yet another teacher who, told me, you'll never amount to anything. You're never going to grow up and be anything. You're just going to be a troublemaker. I won't be surprised if you're in jail, right? These are the people. Exactly. These are the people, speaking of trust, that we have to have this blind faith and this blind trust in, that they're not harming our children. So in addition to the kids, my son had to deal with adults who were, for whatever reason, and I don't know why, and I'm not just being what is the word, when you're kind of blinded, right? Blind love, right? It's not just because he's my son, right? But he's a good person.
You don't have blinders on.
Yeah, he's a very, very, very good person, but for whatever reason. Yeah, that stigma of that label of being in, special education. And it just started to be something that he focused on, other than the positive things.
Right.
He kind of focused on kind of the more negative things, and just felt like, I don't think I belong here. So,
yeah, I can definitely understand what you're saying, because I tell this story a lot, but it was like one of the most ultimately traumatic moments of my life when, but in my first hospitalization, I asked my doctor, I said, why am I here? There's nothing wrong with me, which is like a classic case of agnosognosia, but I couldn't see my illness, but he said, Dale, if you broke your leg, you come to the hospital, right? I said, yes. And he'd say, well, you broke your brain. And that like really like affected me basically for 30 years,
wow.
because
Wow.
when I was first hospitalized, the idea was that, schizophrenia was like untreatable, and all you could do was hope to cope and, live in halfway houses for all your life and everything. And,
Yeah.
and I feel very proud to I've been in my own apartment for 41 years. I graduated college, and, I've done all sorts of things, but still I was affected by that simple statement. If you broke your brain, it was like, wow, what hope is there? And
Yeah.
so okay, so how long was he hospitalized when he was 13? Did he get over
Oh,
that?
well, I don't remember exactly. At least a week, probably like 5 to 7 days that he was hospitalized. And um, uh, I mean, I'm at a loss for words now, like I was at a loss then, in terms of what now? Where do we go now? Is this over? Is this just because he is afraid of something right now in life, or what is this? And they put him on, medication, of course. And I saw that the medications would result in really high highs or really low lows, and I'm not a big proponent of medication first, right? I believe that it's good. It has its place. That's not where I go first. So I didn't want to have him on medication, but he wasn't learning in school, and was just struggling, and he did have some challenges, focusing and concentrating. But there had been a while since the next hospitalization, but things really started when he was 21 years old. That was the actual bipolar disorder diagnosis, and it was definitely very different from the challenges in school and in learning, and got to take him out of this school. Now I got to go find a school over here. And he was a little bit socially maladjusted. So just trying to find those ways. But I'll never forget, I was at work and I got a phone call from my son. He was angry, but he was angry with me. And at first I thought, okay, and he was disrespectful. And I was like, what in the world? wasn't at all like him. And my first thought was, okay, well, he didn't have any, teenage rebellion, so it's okay. It's happening at 21. So if I need to be a tough mom, I know I can be a tough mom. I can be a tough person, so I can be a tough mom, right? And it turned out, the tough mom. It became apparent after not very long that wasn't the issue, and uh, he was uh, he was diagnosed bipolar, and that just began several years of in and out of hospitals, not knowing from one day to the next when he would call, when my phone would ring and it was my son, I didn't know what to expect. I would just brace myself. There were, oh boy, he had manic episodes where he would just, you know, be,
Ecstatic or falsely ecstatic, or it was like,
no, he would just be running through the streets. It makes me very sad to think about.
right.
So, um,
Well, I don't want to.
yeah, so it just had these moments where I honestly, Dale, I didn't know. Like you mentioned earlier, I had come to resolve myself that my son, and it's totally fine. Like he's going to be with me his whole life. I don't know that he'll ever be able to live independently. And I was okay with that. Like whatever I need to do, uh, but I also know in the order that I think is right, if he survives me, how am I going to make sure he's going to be okay when I'm not
Right.
here, right? So that was always on my mind, and it was always planning that, trying to get him to be independent. Hopefully, one day he could be independent, but not anticipating that day would ever come.
Right. So, so he lived at home. He never went to a halfway house, or like a residence or anything, or
Sure,
he.
no, he went to a couple of inpatient facilities. Yeah, and we actually he did live in a residential independent living facility. We gave that a try. It didn't work out. He was always going back to the hospital, you know, and it was just constant up and down, just 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 constantly trying. And the fortunate thing um, was we could go anywhere in terms of treatment because he was on our insurance.
Right.
We had, fortunately, we had some good insurance. But when he turned 26, it became a different story in terms of facilities that he could be admitted to, um, and that was interesting as well. But um, yeah, there were years of in and out of the hospital, years of, are we okay now? No, it looks like we just had another episode. Oops, he's back at the hospital. Oops, I just got a phone call. The police are at the house. Oops, we would put things away in the house so that he couldn't get to them, so he couldn't harm himself. Unfortunately, he wasn't about harming other people. And the other very, 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 very fortunate thing for my son is he never tried to self-medicate,
Right.
which I've been so grateful for. I don't know why, but he didn't. And um, I think as we talk a little bit more about where he is today, it may be partly why. Um, but I didn't really see a way out of you know um, of his
So,
diagnosis.
so I don't want to depress you, because you're so good about being here and everything, and I know it can be like, thinking back, it can be very sad, and bring up, feelings that maybe you haven't dealt with. But so why don't we be positive and talk about how he recovered and how he's doing today, and I mean, what was the process? I mean, because I was also in a psych. I mean, I was hospitalized 15 times in 18 years, and so it was like, I would get out, and I would, I would count, I would like keep track of how long It was since I went to the hospital, and then I would like have a relapse. So I think actually my longest stint was from like January '93 to 2001. I think that was like the big record that I had. But now, basically,
Wow,
I have been out of the hospital for 30 years.
that's
So
awesome.
there
That's
is hope, and there is the concept of recovery that a lot of people, when they're immersed in the day-to-day battle of like fighting for their loved one's sanity, that it can be very difficult to see the long picture and say, well, there is hope. I mean, I don't know if you know, but the motto of my company is recovery is always an option. But
I love
the
that.
the the key word there is option, because the person has to have the self-awareness and the desire to get better. And some people just throw in the towel, or they just don't realize what has to be done. And that's why I try to coach the families, and say, well, these are the steps you can take. And the first step is just like to establish a dialogue, establish some sort of way to converse and relate to your loved one. Would you say that's true? Or, I mean, what would you say the first step you realized was?
Well, I think the first step is the same first step, and that is love, and that is unconditional love. I think that's the first step is that someone knows that whatever you're experiencing and whatever you're going through, and how no matter how you view yourself, this is how I view you, right? And even when you're viewing yourself the worst, that worst person, I still love, right? And I'm still here. So that's to me is always step number one, is that acceptance, right? And making sure people understand, the family, right? Understand that you're there for them and you're in their corner. Um, so I will share with you, just real briefly, my kid's father, and I didn't know it until very well into our relationship. Actually, at the time, they called it manic depression, but that's bipolar disorder.
Right,
And he was diagnosed manic depressive, um, like I said, long after I had all my kids, and I had never seen any indication of anything. So once I learned that, I'm like, okay, I hear it's kind of genetic, right? It's something that can. So I wasn't sure, but I knew for years and years and years he'd never had any kind of episode. And then one day he had an episode, and I was like, what was that?" Right? So what that told me, though, is it didn't have to be something that was daily, right? Just in coming to my understanding of this with my son, it didn't have to be something that was daily, but I also saw it as something that, as you said, it was an option, it was a choice, right? So vitally important. My son did decide that he wanted to have an independent life, and he moved. He moved to another state, which to me, I was like, oh, okay, well, we'll see how this goes, right? You're never so sure, but I'll tell you, Dale, he did. He moved to Texas and had some struggles, but man, he called me one day and he said, "Mom, I made a decision." He said, "I've decided." First of all, he's got a lot of faith. My my my
right,
my son absolutely believes in God, believes in Jesus Christ, and knows that He is there for him. And so my son, uh, is very, very, very strong in his belief in that regard. And it's just a matter of coming around sometimes to knowing that faith in things that you can't see but trust in. So he put his trust in God, and he said, "Mom, I made a decision. I don't want this life anymore." He said, I just don't. He said, "I am valued, right? My life is valuable." And I don't have to prove that to anyone because God already said that for me, right? He already made that proclamation, that declaration about me. And he said, I'm not on any medicine anymore. He said, and I've never been happier than I feel right now. He said, I love myself and I made a decision that I just don't want that life anymore. And I thought, that's amazing. I had been trying to, to kind of get him off the medication because I felt that that wasn't necessarily always helpful.
Right.
Um, um, but man, it gave me so much hope for him, right? Because remember, I said I just had resolved that he would live with me for the
Right.
rest of it. But that gave me hope. His decision and his belief in himself to be able to change how his life was going, how just the circumstances really in his life that he had control over it, right? So just like you said, a choice, he made a choice. And
Right.
today, my son is independently living, financially responsible, not reliant on me, working. He's been consistently working. He's had the job that he has right now, he's had for over a year. It was such a struggle for him to hold a job, right? Now he's been gainfully employed solid straight for the past over the past year. And it really is a miracle to me. I believe miracles happen every day. Um, and he for me is a miracle and it just really just showed me that literally anything is possible.
Well, that's a beautiful story, and I like to sort of like take up this idea of faith, and because I think it's not only not only gave your son the power to like make that decision, but also I know it sustained you too, and just the belief in God and the belief in Jesus. I mean, whatever your religion, I mean, but the belief in God and that desire for like being responsible to a higher power, I think, is like very essential to not only recovery from mental illness, but also just like living a good life. Uh,
Well, my thought is this: there was never a time when I wasn't telling my son that the life that God had planned for him, he could experience, right? And I was always very, very purposeful in making sure that my son knew that his life was valuable. The fact that God breathed breath into his body and through his lungs at all made him worthy and and someone who had a purpose here in life, right? And I would always tell him all the joy that he would bring, to people's lives, how many people that he would touch, right? And let him know that if he weren't here, those lives couldn't be affected by him, right? So definitely making sure he was always clear on on believing that he was put here not haphazardly, and the things that he experiences are there for a reason, and to find the silver lining, right? In what was always this cloud, right? Find the silver lining and know that that's what you should be focusing on. So yeah, definitely always let him know that God loved him. I loved him, and to have faith that the things that he's going through now are not things that he will go through forever.
Well, that's one thing I say is that I'm like I'm more mentally healthy because I've been to the other side of insanity and I've come back. It's like and it's very reassuring. But this idea of like faith and and one thing that I think about is even when you're diagnosed or you're in the hospital or anything, you always have two sides to yourself. You always have the healthy side and the sick side, and I mean, just you mentioned this sort of in passing, but this idea that it's not it's the person who who's showing symptoms isn't the person you love. You don't you can love the person without loving his actions, and I think that's very important to bear in mind too. So, uh, but I just, I meant, I feel that like my schizophrenia was given to me to get to the other side so that I can like teach people and just show people the potential that I have as a recovered person rather than and I think a lot of people I think I inspire, but maybe that's your son's goal, maybe that's your son's purpose too, is to just like to be an example for for the public, for the I hate the word masses, but for the public, and to just show them the possibilities of recovery and what happened, how a person can like come from multiple hospitalizations and being basically in the pits of psychosis and then rise to like the heavens of enlightenment.
Yeah. I think it starts with knowing how to take care for how to care for yourself. Something happened very recently with my son, where before he wasn't able to identify when he needed to stop and do some self care, right, and some self love, right, and that's part of the evolution, I think, is being able to recognize certain triggers, and certain things that are beginning to happen to you. And say, hey, this, I now know what it is, and I now know what I need to do to make sure I'm taking care of myself, so I don't find myself back on kind of the cycle, right, of hospitalizations again. So definitely, I think we all have a purpose. Now, is my son's purpose to be an inspiration to others who kind of, have the same kind of journey? I don't know, but I know he can be. What I do know is it begins with him, for himself, because he can't help other people, right, if he can't even help himself. So I know that. I believe my son is so just so likable. People just like him. He's very, 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 very talkative. As he One of his favorite words when he was a little boy, when he first learned, was very loquacious. It's like, yeah, because you're very loquacious. So he used to talk a lot. And I think he has a lot to say that can help other people and that can help impact other people. But to be able to be example in this regard of, coming out of the like I said, what I just call the cycle, the journey of the mental health struggles to being mentally healthy, absolutely is something that he can put to use for others. And he believes so much in service and serving other people and helping other people. Like I said, he's very giving, very empathetic, and wants to help. So yeah, I think it certainly is something that he would love.
But even if he's not like actually like talking to other people and everything, but just the amount of self confidence and the amount of self esteem and love you get from like coming out of something like that, you call it a cycle, and I call this well, schizophrenia isn't a cycle. Schizophrenia is just like boom, the rocket taking off into a mental illness, but and bipolar is more cycle, between high and low and everything. But uh, I just, I'm just thinking that uh, I lost my thought. Well, the the desire for health has to be strong, and and if there are very few people, there are very few examples. Oh, I know what I was going to say. The last 6 times I was hospitalized, I put myself in the hospital.
Yeah.
Because I knew I was psychotic, and I had the self awareness, and that type of self awareness is really essential too. I think for recovery is that
Yeah.
because I don't know if you know what agnosia is, but it's basically the inability to understand that you're sick, that there's
Okay.
something wrong. So you can be you can be totally psychotic and think that there's nothing wrong, and meanwhile everybody you're surrounded with is freaking out and saying you got to get help and everything, and until you can like get through agnosia and like see, at least have an inkling of of the illness that you're dealing with, then it's very hard to make progress.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I agree, which is why I mentioned that, that it starts with him and him being able to recognize when he needed to go and get help, and to, as I call it, self care. There is so much stigma associated with mental illness. I actually have an aunt who dealt with schizophrenia. I have an uncle who dealt with schizophrenia. And then, of course, as I mentioned, my kid's father, who was diagnosed manic depression. And there's just always been a fear or a worry, right? That someone's just, it's just unpredictable, right? And that is true. That there is some unpredictable tendencies. But we don't have to be afraid of that, because that fear can spill onto that person. It makes them feel even more weird or different, or what's wrong with me, right? So I think it's important to be mindful that, and I think that it's becoming more and more understood that the way we respond and the way we react to people especially people who have mental illness, plays a direct role in their recovery. Right. So if we don't make it so different and we just kind of normalize it, and I think part of the steps to helping my son get there was normalizing who he was and letting him know, dude, God made you this way. You're perfect.
Right.
Your brain is not broken, right? Your brain's not broken. God made you this way, so you must be perfect. Now let's help you figure out how you deal with you and how you accept who you are, and the best way for you to be able to be productive in your own life, right? And have control over your own life. I think that that's so important that we stop. We end the stigma. Just stop it. So.
But the other thing is, you brought a point about, if people are telling you, I mean, this is what happened to me. I was in a psychiatric program for 5.5 years, and I was hospitalized 9 times when I was in there, and it was just like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because
Yeah.
if I like acted strange or actually myself, then people would say, you're headed back to the hospital, and like my doctor was always saying, you're going to the hospital, Dale. And it's like, why? I mean, because, I'm just being myself. And,
Yeah.
sometimes being yourself, especially when you're diagnosed with a mental illness, is like the most courageous thing you can do. And,
Yeah.
it's just like, and people, I mean, I was in a program with other people with mental illness, and they would still tell me that I was crazy, So,
Well, you know, we can't control what everybody else does. We
right,
just can't, right? So I can control me. So my goal was to control how, as best I could, how my son viewed how I viewed my son. Right. If we in his house made him feel like he was different and we're not, and we were very, very deliberate about making sure he knew, dude, you're accepted. We accept you just the way you are. Right. And there are things that you can do that will have consequences that might not be so good, and there are things you can do that'll have consequences that could be in your favor, right? And it's up to you to choose. So again, we're back to that choice, right? But we made sure he knew that whatever way he was, because guess what, somebody out there might view me as strange, and I've got some strange things about me, right? But if that's all the person or the people are focusing on about me is the thing about me that's different, well then yeah, that might start to make me feel a certain way, and then I might feel like, oh yeah, then self-fulfilling prophecy, just like you said, they said I'm weird, so I must be weird, instead of I am me.
right.
I am not Dale. I am Cozette, and I like Cozette. And this is what I want Cozette to represent to the world. And I get to choose how I put myself out to the world. People can interpret it however they want to. It's not my job to make sure they interpret it the way I want them to. But it is my job to decide how I want to project me to the world. And my son made a decision on how he wanted to project himself to himself and then to the world. So,
Beautiful. So, you brought up something. So, How did you said that he was always accepted by the family, but did his illness like affect the family dynamic significantly, or I mean, how did your other children react? I mean, because in my experience as a coach, I find that like a lot of people, especially schizophrenia, they focus so much on the person with the diagnosis that like there can be a lot of resentment and anger from other members of the family because they aren't getting the mother's attention, for example, because she's like so focused on helping the affected one that the others are sort of like left out in the cold sometimes. And so how was the family dynamic affected?
Oh, well, there were some adjustments to be made, right? Because this was new territory, right? My so I actually have two kids who were considered special needs kids, right? And so and then I have one child who's very, very independent and liked being independent. Um, so fortunately, we're a pretty supportive family. It was topsy-turvy. It was very, very, very topsy-turvy, 'cause we didn't know what his behavior would be one day to the next, one moment to the next. But everyone was actually very, not just supportive, but protective of my son. His sisters are both older than he just they're a year and 2 years older, but everyone was very protective of my son. I don't know why there was such a keen awareness that my daughters had to make sure that he was um, uh, aware that they were there for him in school. If anyone wanted to mess with him, and they were there, they would stand up for him. So we didn't really have to do that so much at the time, Dale. I think there might be a little bit of concern about that, as we look back, that maybe one of the daughters didn't get as much attention because there was always so much attention needed to put on Mario, because Mario was always in the hospital and Mario was always doing something. Mario was always always had to leave work and go to school and get Mario. I was always Mario, 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 right? But they were very understanding, and they absolutely love their brother, and were very protective of him and supportive. And so we didn't have that kind of a dynamic really happening in our
Right.
and I'm fortunate. I'm glad that I didn't.
Well, it's a testament to your mothering too, Cozette.
Well, I'll accept that. I don't know, but I'll accept it. Sometimes, we learn so much from our kids if we're open to learning from our kids. Sometimes you just go because you just have to go. You don't really have any other choice. You just got to go. And so, you just have to learn. You're going to have to cope with this today. I know you had a special thing planned for today, but Mario's out of the hospital. So I'm really sorry. And I would be there if I could, and hope that just didn't turn into something else. You know what I mean? We just go. We just got to go do what we got to do. So.
Well, I'm very. I mean, for a while, I like reacted negatively to my mother and how quickly she put me in the hospital after I had my break at Dartmouth. But I understand also that everything she did was out of an absolute love for me, and as time has gone on, I've like seen that, and the reason I started my business with families of schizophrenia is I really felt that I tried to consider the hell I put my family through, and just like saw that I call them the families of forgotten victims of mental illness, because people, the affected people have like doctors and social workers and psychologists and psychiatrists and everything. I mean, obviously, there can be like income issues and everything, but basically, the affected ones are like, or at least people try to give them a support team, but the families are sometimes left out in the cold, and I really feel, the reason I got into this is because I felt that they deserved and they needed someone who could like relate to them and help them deal with these problems, the daily challenges and everything. And so, that's why I started my business. But, this idea that, the, the affected, I call it diagnosee. I hate the word patient. So I call them diagnosee. But, the diagnoses exist in a void is like very destructive to the rest of the family. And, I'm trying to break down the barriers to that and help people understand the struggle is normal. And well, it's not normal, but
I it's someone's normal, right?
right,
So it's someone's normal. So normal, abnormal, whatever, it's someone's normal. So, but I agree with you that that we just try to be, we want to be as supportive as possible, and make it's someone's life. It's a life and a life experience. And how can we play a role in making that experience the best it can be? And as a mom, I felt and feel that one of my duties was to create a life experience while I'm the one responsible that you could look back on and say, wow, mom, those experiences I appreciate so much, right? And I hope that I've given my son and my daughter, or my kids, but as we're talking in the context of mental health, I hope that I've given my son experiences that he can look back on and say, even though I was, going through that, you gave me the experience of this to counter that, right? So it's still a life, and it's what's the life experience that we want to have, and
right.
live that we want to have. So
Well, I think that might be a very good way to wrap up here. But thank you very much, Cozette. It's been very enlightening, and thank you for your insights and your honesty and transparency. It's been very refreshing because I think a lot of people have like a lot of difficulty talking about subjects like this because it's just like too painful, or they don't want to like deal with the pain or the challenges or the struggles that they have to face. So I really
yeah,
appreciate you being here, and just hold on. I'm going to close down the show, but we'll just debrief a little bit afterwards. But thank you very much, and I and best of luck. I just pray that your son continues his upward journey into health, and God bless you too, Cozette.
thank you for having me, Dale. God bless you.
Okay, thank you.